salt. Literally table salt. It's abundant, it's safe, you definitely wouldn't sprinkle it on your chips if it wasn't, and it's cheap. And for years now on the show, we've been talking about its potential to store electricity, imagining a world where sodium, not so much lithium, is storing clean, affordable power and powering our homes. But until recently, it's all felt rather theoretical. That is, until now, because today we are here with a company called 11 Energy to see some sodium-ion batteries out in the wild. So we're here to understand how sodium is shaking up the battery world, and this is the Everything Electric Show.
Our 3 free YouTube channels on EVs and clean tech are funded by our fun-packed test drive-tastic events in Farnborough, London, the Southwest, the North, Melbourne and Sydney. Next up, Everything Electric Melbourne. And new for UK viewers, you can buy a battery electric vehicle or more at everythingelectric.store. Back to the episode.
So when we talk about sodium-ion batteries, we're talking about the charged ion which shuttles between the cathode and anode when a battery charges and discharges. And in a sodium-ion battery, it uses sodium rather than lithium ions. Now, 11 Energy is so called because the atomic number of sodium is 11. Now, the atomic number is how many protons there are in the atom's nucleus, and it's what really defines the characteristics of a particular element. Now, lithium sits very closely to sodium on the periodic table, but the difference is it has an atomic number of 3, which means that the atoms can be much more densely packed, and that's why lithium-ion batteries tend to have a higher energy density than sodium with its atomic number of 11. So just to put that into perspective for you, an LFP battery typically has an energy density of between 140 and 190 watt-hour per kilos. NMC, meanwhile, 240 to 350 watt-hours per kilo, and sodium ion typically is in the range of 100 to 160 watt-hours per kilo. Now clearly that is a lower energy density, and if we were talking about something like an electric vehicle, that could be a bit problematic because you wouldn't be able to store as much energy in the same space as you could, say, with NMC and LFP. But when it comes to home energy storage, actually space is a bit less of a premium. Now, to show you one example, this is actually a 9 kilowatt hour system, and actually this unit is only really 10 to 15% bigger than its lithium ion counterpart. And in this 9 kilowatt hour system, it's actually got 2 4.5 kilowatt hour batteries, and that's paired with a 6 kilowatt inverter because there is a ton of solar on the roof and there is also a heat pump.
Typically what we'd say to people is size your system roughly along the lines of what you use in your house over a day. That means you've got, even on a grey day where you might not get much from the sun, you've got enough in your battery to sort of power yourself through a full day. You're not going to risk running out too much. Having said that, so this is fairly typical for a household, which would usually use maybe 9-10 kilowatt hours in a day.
Now, there are loads of benefits when it comes to sodium-ion batteries, and I want to put some of them past you and kind of understand what exactly is going on. So, for example, we know that these can have a higher nominal voltage, a broader temperature range, they can fully discharge, and they have a higher cycle life. What do all of those things mean, and why is it that sodium's capable of those things rather than, the equivalent LFP or NMC?
Yeah, so I mean, to take one of those things, for example, the low temperature, that's definitely a real advantage. Although we're in a garage here, more and more battery systems are actually being installed outside these days. And it was a pretty chilly morning today. We've just come into the garage where it's a little bit warmer. But at this time of year, where we're getting down sometimes towards freezing, particularly overnight, what happens in a lithium-ion battery is that the electrolyte actually starts to sort of gel, so it is no longer fluid, and that means the charges can't get in and out of the electrodes, the cathode and the anode in the battery. So you actually find that a lot of the lithium-ion battery manufacturers are putting heaters in their battery just in order to keep it warm overnight in these cold periods, and that means you're sucking energy just to keep your battery running efficiently. But with a sodium-ion battery, we use a different electrolyte, and in fact, you can go right down to about -20 with these cells. So you don't need those heaters, and yeah, it's just a much more efficient system.
The other thing that we see is that sodium-ion batteries are able to fully discharge
Yeah.
Why is that significant?
It is something that can make it safer during transport. If you don't have any energy stored in your battery, then you can discharge it completely, and it is a lot safer when you're sort of transporting it around. In fact, in practice, when you're sort of using a system and it's installed, you always need some charge in the battery, because otherwise the inverter here doesn't realise it's got anything attached to it. It needs some voltage there. But one thing we've done with this inverter is it's modified. It's slightly different from a lithium-ion inverter and goes down to a lower voltage at the bottom end, and that allows us to get more of our charge stored in the battery out in each sort of charge-discharge cycle. So we go down to about sort of 8% being left in the battery before we sort of cut out and say that's empty, whereas typically you would leave sort of 15 or even 20% in a lithium-ion system.
That's so interesting, because so even though it's 10 to 15% bigger, actually potentially you're using
more of that,
more of the energy in there.
And in fact, another difference between lithium and sodium is that the sodium doesn't mind being discharged. It's quite happy going completely flat and being charged and cycling sort of that full amount, whereas lithium doesn't really enjoy being flattened completely. And if you do that, you'll lower the cycle life.
Now, we know that sodium-ion batteries could ultimately be cheaper than their lithium-ion or NMC counterparts, not least because sodium is so abundant. Probably that's not the case right now, because this is still a reasonably new technology. But for a 9 kilowatt hour system like we have here, how much should homeowners really be setting aside?
Yeah, I mean, of course, it will all depend very much on the sort of size of the system, and if you're having solar installed as well, then there'll be scaffolding, of course, to get up on the roof. Usually the battery goes in at the same time as the solar. One thing to remember is that it's sort of 0% VAT, so when you do spend your money on your system, you are getting quite a discount compared to everything else you're buying. It will depend on whether you go for sort of 2 batteries, whether you go for 8 batteries, whether you go for 3, 4, 5, 6 kilowatt inverter. But you could be spending anything from sort of 3,000 or 4,000 up to maybe 10,000 or so, depending on whether you're going for just the battery or the solar as well.
And also, I suppose it's going to come down to your installer as well.
Yes, yeah, of course. It all depends. Go out, get 2 or 3 quotes from people who work in your area. I would say at the moment, the sort of wholesale cost of a sodium battery to an installer is very much on a par with lithium. So we're selling this unit at the same price as the equivalent sort of 9 kilowatt hour lithium battery pack. As you said, the price will come down over time because sodium is so much more abundant. The raw materials are cheaper, easier to get hold of. But what we just need is that sort of manufacturing scale to get to the point where we're sort of competing with the gigafactories that are churning out these lithium cells all day, every day. So yeah, about the same price as the equivalent lithium system at the moment, but that will come down.
And you've been living with the sodium-ion battery for almost a year. Have you noticed anything? Has it been easy? Has it been inconvenient? What's it been like?
It's been really easy. It's encouraged us to think about our energy on a year timescale, because now we think about when the sun's out, how much are we going to store? How much are we going to export? Can we save some money and spend that in winter when the heat pump's on? So we're really thinking much more holistically about how we're using our energy and what we can do to save it when there's lots of sun, and what we need to store up for winter as well. So it's been a really good way for us to think about energy as a family in general.
We've come down the road to take a look at another of 11 Energy's installs, because this one is a little bit different. But before we show you, I think it's worth reflecting on the state of the UK's home battery market so far. Because so far there have been 100,000 installs, and whilst the rate of installs is definitely increasing, 100,000 is a small fraction of the total 24 million dwellings here in the UK. But things are moving in the direction, not least because currently there is 0% VAT on batteries. And if you pair your home battery with solar, you can actually increase your self-consumption from your own generation from 30 to 80%, which ultimately can save homeowners between £400 and £600 a year. So it's no wonder that around 60% of home battery installs also go alongside solar. But even if batteries aren't paired with solar, there's still a huge amount to be gained, and that is all thanks to smart energy tariffs. Because smart energy tariffs mean that you can buy energy, charge up your batteries when it's low, and use it or sell it back to the grid when prices are high. Now, that is exactly what they are trying to do here, because this is a 36 kilowatt hour system. Really huge, much larger than you would typically need. So that is made of 8 4.5 kilowatt hour batteries. It's obviously paired with an inverter, and there is the intention to add a further 8, bringing it up to 72 kilowatt hours. That is doing everything from the electric cars, all of the heating, all of the electricity, really ensuring that this house is totally off gas. So charging it up at night when prices are low, also using their solar, and discharging when it's really cheap, and going back to the grid. Now you might be thinking, well, going back to the grid, maybe you're only getting 10p per kilowatt hour, but those 10p's will turn into pounds, turning into hundreds of pounds over the course of the year.
At 36 kilowatt hours means that we can charge it up entirely overnight on a very cheap rate. We can run all our demand for the house during the day using that cheap electricity. And then if we have got any left on that particular day, we can export it back to the grid at peak rates when we get the best price for it.
But in order to actually make that happen, it's contingent on a very smart energy management system. And fortunately, 11 Energy have also thought of that.
What we wanted to ensure was that the system automatically adapts to not only the changes in usage around the house, but also the changes in weather conditions and potentially tariffs. So the system A, you just tell us what tariff you're on. We then talk to your energy provider like Octopus and understand what the upcoming rates are or what the variability of those rates are. And then we also know where the system is. We actually use the GPS of the installer's phone to know where the system is. We're downloading weather data. So as a combination of the weather forecasts for tomorrow and previous weather conditions, we can pretty accurately determine what the usage is going to be tomorrow. And then we forecast how much to charge the battery and how much to discharge the battery automatically. So what that means is if you're on a tariff like Agile, where the rates are constantly changing, we're actually predicting in real time the most optimal times not only to charge the battery, but also when to discharge the battery to maximise the return on investment. But even if you're on a variable tariff that has the same time windows every day, what that means is as you transition from winter through to spring, through to summer, and the battery needs to charge less and you get more in through the solar, we adapt automatically. You don't need to change any of the timers as you transition from season to season.
So you're taking in loads of information, not least from the electricity tariff, but also what the weather's doing, but also how are you calibrating how homeowners actually use the electricity and optimizing that as well?
So what we're doing is we're using sensors that either plug in, so if you've got a tumble dryer or a washing machine, they just plug into a standard 13 amp outlet, but also sensors that can understand the usage of an EV charger, but also things like heat pumps. So we're not just understanding how much energy the house is using over the course of the day, we know what in the house is using what. So if, for example, we can see loads on a heat pump, and if we know that the weather's going to be colder tomorrow than it is today, we know that we need to reserve a little bit more energy for that.
And in terms of maximising your return on investment, is that all about maximising the ability to arbitrage and to actually give back to the grid or charge up when electricity prices are low?
Yeah, a lot of people ask the question, how much solar do I need? And the answer to that is all of it. You know, you absolutely fill your roof with panels, because especially with the tariffs in the UK at the moment, if you look at, especially if you own an EV, you pay about half overnight than you are paid to export during the day. So it doesn't actually make any sense if you're on one of those tariffs to actually use any of your solar. So you just charge the battery overnight. That is your capacity, and then you just sell back all of the solar during the day. Now, what that can mean is that certainly at the height of summer, that there's more coming in on the roof than you're actually able to export. So our system is actually able to predict that. And if we see the fact that actually during the peak of the day, during that kind of 11 till 1 o'clock period, there's going to be more coming in the roof than you're able to export, we actually bleed a little bit of the battery out in advance so that that extra energy that we can't be exporting and the house doesn't need can go into the battery. And then as that period then elapses, we then start to feed that capacity out to the grid as well. So I think arbitrage, if people are looking to maximise their return on investment, arbitrage is a big part of that. And it can take literally years off of your return on investment.
Around the world, companies are already cashing in on the promise of this cheap, salty battery chemistry. In China, for example, CATL and Homeowner are already mass producing these cells for use in cars and energy storage. In the US, Natron's Energy is using them for high-power data centres. And in Europe, both in Switzerland and in Germany, grid-scale sodium-ion battery storage solutions are also being deployed. And here in the UK, we also have a number of pioneers. We of course have 11 Energy, but also Faradion and Lena Energy too, all pushing the sodium-ion battery forward. And whilst 11 Energy's battery cells are not made in the UK, they could be, because we already produce so much salt here. It is vital for our industry. And in fact, in Cheshire, the Winsford mine, it produces rock salt for use on roads, and local brine fields also supply the chemical industry, creating chlorine, soda ash, caustic soda for use in plastics and glass. And so whilst this very humble material is so humble in its nature, it has huge and profound consequences for industry, and very soon could be vital in creating homegrown, or at least storing homegrown clean energy. It's so clear that there are so many advantages to sodium-ion technology that more than make up for the fact that it's 10 to 15% bigger in volume than its lithium-ion counterpart. It's cheaper, it's safer, it's more abundant, and the more of them that we have, the cost is only going to continue coming down. But what's also been clear is that actually to maximise what you get from these systems and to make that return on investment even more compelling, you need to pair them with a very smart ecosystem. And we have seen that in absolute abundance here with 11 Energy. But that is all that we have time for today. Please do let us know what you think in the comments. Please do like and subscribe. And if you have been, thank you for watching.